I never imagined the woman who gave birth to me would become the architect of my downfall. But when my own siblings started looking at me like I was the enemy, I realized something far worse than betrayal was happening. For most of my life, I believed family manipulation was something that happened in other people's stories, the kind you hear about online and think, that could never be us. I was wrong. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was the eldest daughter in a family where love always came with conditions, and my mother, she knew exactly how to pull every string without ever getting her hands dirty. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the fixer, the emotional glue holding everyone together. If my brother messed up, I smoothed things over. If my sister cried, I listened. And if my mother was stressed, I absorbed it, quietly, obediently. At least, that's what I thought love was supposed to look like. But emotional abuse doesn't always arrive as shouting or insults. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it wears the mask of, I'm only saying this because I care. Looking back, the seeds of betrayal were planted early. My mother loved control, but she hated confrontation. So instead of telling me directly when she was upset, she told my siblings. Instead of resolving conflict, she rewrote narratives. Small comments at first. She's changed lately. She thinks she's better than us now. I worry she doesn't care about family anymore. I didn't hear these words until much later, but by then they had already done their damage. At family gatherings, conversations would stop when I walked in. My jokes landed flat. My presence felt inconvenient. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just normal family tension, but that's how gaslighting works. It convinces you to doubt your instincts while the ground slowly disappears beneath your feet. The real shift happened after I moved out. Independence was supposed to be a good thing. I had my own place, my own income, my own boundaries. And that's when my mother lost her grip. Suddenly, I was selfish, ungrateful, too busy to care. Those labels didn't come from her directly. They came from my siblings. My own brother once snapped at me, "You think you're too good for us now?" I remember freezing because I had never said or even thought anything like that. That was the moment I realized this wasn't random conflict. This was coordinated. Family manipulation thrives in silence, and I had been silent for far too long. What I didn't know then was that my mother had been quietly orchestrating a campaign of emotional abuse, turning my siblings into weapons and me into the villain. And the worst part? She did it so calmly that no one suspected her, not even me at first. I tried to fix it. That's what I had always done. When something felt off in my family, I stepped in and smoothed things over. I invited my siblings out for coffee. I sent long, thoughtful messages. I showed up early to family dinners and stayed late to help clean. But no matter how much effort I put in, the distance only grew. My sister stopped answering my texts the way she used to. My brother became short and defensive, like every conversation was a trap. And my mother? She smiled, always calm, always the peacemaker. If I ever hinted that something felt wrong, she would tilt her head and say, "I don't know why you're feeling this way. Everyone loves you." That sentence haunted me, because if everyone loved me, why did I feel so alone? This is how emotional abuse hides in plain sight. There are no bruises, no screaming matches, just confusion and self-doubt. I started questioning myself constantly. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I had changed. That's the power of family manipulation. It rewrites reality slowly until you don't recognize your own reflection anymore. The comments became sharper. My sister once said, "Mom thinks you're embarrassed by us." Another time, my brother muttered, "You're never there when we need you." Every accusation felt like a knife because they were all based on lies I never got the chance to correct. What I didn't know then was that my mother had perfected the art of triangulation. She never spoke badly about me to my face. She spoke about me through them. If I said no to a favor, she told them I was abandoning the family. If I set boundaries, she framed it as rejection. and she always delivered it wrapped in concern. "I'm just worried about her," she'd say. "She seems so distant lately." That's how betrayal works when it wears a soft voice. The real damage wasn't the lies, it was how they changed my siblings' behavior. They stopped sharing their lives with me, stopped asking for advice, stopped trusting my intentions. I had become the outsider in my own family, and every time I tried to defend myself, it backfired. The more I explained, the more defensive they became. The more I reached out, the colder they turned. Meanwhile, my mother stayed untouched. In every conflict, she was the calm center, the reasonable one, the victim who just wanted peace. That's when I started to notice something chilling. Every fight between my siblings and me somehow ended with her being comforted and me being blamed. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix things, because you can't win against betrayal when the rules are written in secret. And deep down, a quiet realization settled in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. And if I wanted my life back, I'd have to stop playing the role she assigned me. I stopped confronting them. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized every word I said was being twisted before it ever reached the truth. Silence became my shield. And that's when the cracks finally started to show. Without my reactions to feed on, my mother grew restless. She began escalating. Suddenly, my siblings were upset about things I definitely never said, things that sounded nothing like me. My brother accused me of talking badly about him behind his back. My sister claimed I told Mom she was irresponsible and lazy. I remember sitting there, stunned, because those words felt rehearsed, carefully delivered, too specific to be random. That was the moment betrayal stopped being emotional and became strategic. I asked my sister where she heard that. She hesitated, then said, "Mom mentioned it." Just like that. No hesitation, no doubt. It was chilling how easily my mother's version of events had become fact. This is how emotional abuse operates inside families. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and it repeats itself until everyone believes it. I started paying closer attention. The timing of conflicts, the phrasing of accusations, the way my mother always seemed one step ahead. Whenever my siblings confronted me, she was already there, comforting them, validating their anger, subtly reinforcing the narrative that I was the problem. Family manipulation isn't about control through force, it's about control through perception, and she had mastered it. The final straw came during a family dinner. Everything was normal at first. Small talk, forced smiles. Then my brother suddenly said, "Why do you hate Mom so much?" The room went silent. My heart dropped into my stomach. I had never, ever said anything like that. I looked at my mother instinctively. She didn't defend me. She didn't deny it. She just sighed and said, "I didn't want them to tell them, but I was worried this would happen." That sentence changed everything. In that moment, I understood the depth of the betrayal. She wasn't reacting, she was directing. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, but completely. Because when someone can calmly watch their own child be torn apart by lies they created, that's not misunderstanding, that's intent. I excused myself from the table and locked myself in the bathroom, shaking. Not crying, just empty. This wasn't about one argument anymore. This was a pattern, a system, and I finally saw it clearly. My mother had turned my siblings against me, not out of hatred, but out of fear of losing control. And the scariest part? Everyone thought she was the victim, including them. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't defend myself. I did something far more dangerous. I started listening, and what I learned next would change everything. After that night, something inside me went quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just alert. When you grow up in emotional abuse, your instincts get dull, but once you finally see the pattern, every detail starts to feel loud. I replayed conversations in my head, not the arguments, but the pauses, the half sentences, the moments where my mother accidentally revealed too much. And then, by pure coincidence, I heard something I was never meant to hear. I had stopped by my parents' house to pick up some old documents. My mother thought I had already left. I hadn't. I was standing in the hallway when I heard her voice, soft, intimate. "She's always been difficult. She thinks she's smarter than everyone." My sister murmured something in response, and then came the sentence that shattered me. "If you don't stand together, she'll turn you against me." I felt the blood drain from my face. That wasn't concern, that wasn't fear, that was strategy. In that moment, every piece of confusion clicked into place. The triangulation, the whispered accusations, the constant framing of herself as the fragile center everyone had to protect. This wasn't accidental family manipulation. This was a long-term campaign of emotional abuse. I walked out without a sound, sat in my car for nearly an hour staring at nothing. I didn't cry. I couldn't, because grief doesn't always come as tears. Sometimes it comes as clarity so sharp it hurts to breathe. The woman I had defended my entire life had intentionally positioned herself as the victim, using betrayal as a weapon and my siblings as shields. I thought about all the times I had apologized for things I never did, all the nights I stayed awake wondering how I had failed them. And suddenly, the shame wasn't mine anymore. But the pain? That was real. I realized something else, too. If she had been manipulating the story all this time, then maybe I didn't need to fight her at all. Maybe I just needed to step out of the narrative and let it collapse on its own. I didn't expose her. I didn't confront her. I disappeared. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. I stopped initiating contact, stopped explaining myself, stopped trying to earn a place I had already lost. And that was when the real shift began. People who rely on family manipulation don't panic when you fight back. They panic when you stop reacting. At first, my absence went unnoticed. A missed dinner here, a delayed reply there. Then the questions started. My mother texted, "Are you okay?" I replied politely, briefly, emotionless. No accusations, no defenses. That's how you disarm emotional abuse, by refusing to play the role it assigns you. Behind the scenes, I was doing something else. I was documenting everything. Messages, voicemails, contradictions, not to expose her publicly, but to anchor myself in reality. Because gaslighting only works when you forget what really happened. I also started building a life that didn't include constant justification. Therapy, new routines, boundaries that didn't require permission. And something interesting happened. Without me there to absorb tension, the cracks inside the family widened. My mother started leaning harder on my siblings, calling them more, complaining more. The same tactics she used on me now had nowhere else to go. That's the thing about betrayal. It needs a target. Without me, the dynamic shifted. My sister called one night, frustrated. "She's been really intense lately," she said. "I feel like I can't do anything right." I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say anything at all. I just listened. And for the first time, she sounded uncertain. That was my silent revenge. Not punishment, not humiliation, just space, enough for the truth to breathe. Family manipulation collapses when there's no one left to blame. Slowly, my siblings began noticing inconsistencies, promises my mother denied making, stories that changed depending on who she spoke to. The same confusion I had lived in for years was now theirs. I never pointed it out. I never pushed. I let karma work in real time. Because when emotional abuse loses its audience, it turns inward. My mother grew anxious, defensive, over-explaining things no one had questioned. The calm peacemaker mask started slipping. And for the first time, I wasn't the villain in the room. I was simply absent. Healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like distance that reveals the truth. And I knew then, the revenge wasn't what I was doing, it was what I was no longer willing to endure. Karma didn't arrive with chaos. It arrived with discomfort. Without me as the emotional buffer, my mother's behavior became harder to ignore. She started contradicting herself in front of my siblings, forgetting which version of the story she had told to whom. What once sounded like concern now sounded like control. My brother was the first to notice. He called me late one night, hesitant, awkward. "I don't know how to ask this," he said, "but did Mom ever tell you I said things about you that I didn't?" I closed my eyes. That question alone was karma, because it meant doubt had finally replaced certainty. I didn't accuse, I didn't unload years of pain. I just said, yes. Silence filled the line, and in that silence, something shifted. My sister followed weeks later. She admitted she felt emotionally drained, that nothing she did ever seemed good enough anymore. The same pressure I had carried quietly for years was now being shared. Family manipulation works only when there's a single scapegoat. Once that role disappears, the system eats itself. My mother reacted the only way she knew how. She doubled down. More emotional outbursts, more guilt, more rewriting of past events. But now the audience was different. Instead of sympathy, she was met with confusion. Instead of comfort, questions. And questions are dangerous to someone built on emotional abuse. The final moment came during a family conversation I wasn't even part of. My sister later told me what happened. Mom had accused her of being ungrateful, of abandoning the family. The same words, the same tone, and that's when she saw it, not as an isolated incident, but as a pattern. She said, "It felt like she was talking to you, but I was the one sitting there." That was karma. Not revenge, not exposure, just recognition. My siblings didn't suddenly apologize. They didn't fully understand everything, but the blind loyalty was gone, and so was my mother's control. For the first time, she was forced to face relationships that required honesty, not fear, and she didn't know how to survive there. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved, because justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes as the quiet collapse of a lie that can no longer support its own weight. And in that collapse, I finally found something I hadn't felt in years: peace.
Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in quiet moments I hadn't expected. Like the first time I went an entire week without replaying old arguments in my head, or the first family gathering I skipped without feeling guilty. For years, my identity had been wrapped around fixing things, fixing people, fixing feelings, fixing damage I didn't create. Letting go of that role felt like losing a part of myself, but it also felt like breathing again. My siblings and I didn't magically return to what we once were. Trust doesn't reset just because the truth becomes visible. But something changed. They stopped blaming me for things that never belonged to me. They started questioning instead of accusing. And for the first time, our conversations felt real. Not perfect, not warm, but honest. As for my mother, the distance remained, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean access, and love doesn't require self-destruction. That realization took time. I grieved the relationship I wished I had, the mother I defended for so long. And that grief was heavy. But it was also clean. No confusion, no gaslighting, just truth. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come, stopped hoping she would suddenly understand the harm she caused. Because emotional abuse doesn't always end with accountability. Sometimes it ends with boundaries, and that has to be enough. What surprised me most was how much lighter my life became once I stepped out of the chaos. I slept better. I trusted my instincts again. I stopped questioning my worth. The betrayal didn't define me. It clarified me. I learned that family manipulation thrives on loyalty without limits and collapses when self-respect enters the room. I learned that silence can be strength, that walking away can be an act of self-love. And most importantly, I learned this. Karma isn't about watching someone suffer. It's about no longer suffering for them. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by choosing myself. And that victory was quiet, permanent, and mine. People often ask how my story ends. They expect a dramatic confrontation, a tearful apology, some explosive moment where everything finally makes sense. But real life doesn't always give you that. Sometimes the ending is quiet. Today, my life looks nothing like it did back then. I don't wake up with anxiety about family gatherings. I don't rehearse conversations in my head. I don't feel responsible for emotions that aren't mine to carry. The chaos didn't follow me because I chose not to bring it with me. My siblings and I exist in a careful middle ground now. We speak, we check in, we respect distance. There's no pretending nothing happened, and there's no constant tension either. Just awareness. As for my mother, I've accepted something that once felt impossible. She may never see herself clearly. She may never admit the manipulation, the emotional abuse, or the betrayal. And that truth no longer controls me, because healing doesn't require validation from the person who hurt you. It requires honesty with yourself. I stopped asking why she did it, stopped trying to diagnose her behavior. Instead, I asked a different question. Why did I stay so long? The answer wasn't weakness. It was love without boundaries, loyalty taught too early, and the belief that enduring pain was the same as being a good daughter. Letting go of that belief changed everything. Family manipulation taught me one painful lesson, but it gave me something valuable in return: clarity. I know now what respect feels like, what peace sounds like, what love does not require. And most of all, I know this: you don't need revenge to reclaim your power. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and build a life that doesn't revolve around surviving someone else's chaos. If you're listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar, if you've been made the villain in a story you never wrote, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. The moment you stop participating in manipulation is the moment it starts losing its grip. So I'll leave you with this question, not as advice, not as judgment, just curiosity. What would you have done if you were in my place?